Good afternoon, everyone. This is Veliso Buti. I am your co-facilitator for the GTAC PEC 2023 conference. This is the day 2 of our conference, and we're heading towards the last sessions of the conference, but we just thought let's take this time and talk to some of the students who are, of course, part of the economics group. So they're just going to tell us where they're from and what have been their main highlights. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. My name is Basimani Bosman, and I am one of the University of the Witwatersrand students. I'm doing my BCom honors in Applied Development Economics, and I've learned so much. This is day 2. I one of the key highlights that I want to elaborate on is the initiatives, or rather the key policies that have been highlighted throughout the conference, throughout the morning. I'm very impressed as I'm doing my research in, which industrial policies can the government of South Africa implement in the era of industrial revolution. So it's been quite interesting, and I learned a lot.
That's quite great. And tell us more, how did you find out about this conference?
I was actually browsing through LinkedIn, and I saw the application link, and I tried my luck, and luckily I got in.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, and wishing you all the best for your studies. And there you have it. You could hear that all our different media platforms, we've got a whole range of ways of reaching out and marketing the program. And you can see LinkedIn is a very good platform where people are able to see. And also from a professional perspective, I think LinkedIn is also quite great. I also have someone else who's going to tell us where they're from, their name, and your key highlights.
All right, hi Veli. My name is Sikolile Makaba. I'm a student at the University of Fort. I'm doing my second year in master's degree in public economics. I did hear about GTAC. I think I was part of it virtually in 2021 when we were debating about the BIG thingy, and then we won that's how I got the invitation. They sent the link to my personal email, and then by chance I got invited to attend, as in now not from virtual perspective, but as in the encounter physically. My highlight, it's a lot, a lot. Like seriously, I wish I would say that we can have that interaction. Like if young people can interact, just go to the site of GTAC Knowledge Hub, access all these things that you can access in terms of knowledge, all these gaps that you can fit in. You don't sit at home and be like, okay, yes, I'm unemployed. Yes, that is the problem. Just read, understand what is going on. What are the complexities that you are facing in the technicalities of the policies, and then what is the gap of knowledge that you can filter in. Just take the right and learn, then you know, those are the things. Like I really wish for the far reach that we can get from here.
Thank you so much, and all the best. Yes, we also have someone else. Hi, how are you?
Good, and thanks. My name is Zay. I'm from University of Johannesburg. I'm doing BCom honors in econometrics. Yes. Today actually everything, it was informative. I saw how all those programs that have been introduced, in terms of getting young people experience, so that when they go to private, so they can be employable, the likes of EPWP and also CWP, and I feel like those programs are much more important in terms of bringing the gap, as we have shown today, even today, that they can actually alleviate poverty, and then actually close the gap of inequality that we know that South Africa is very high in terms of inequality.
That's quite interesting. And how did you find out about the conference?
I found at the conference, I think I was going through the LinkedIn, and I thought to myself, you know what, okay, I'm going to be doing public economics, second semester. So it will be very, profitable for me, to study, in terms of understanding what's happening, in public economics. And because I'm very interested, and I think one of the reasons why I did economics at school and even now is because I really wanted to bring change to my community, and I believe that if I can have positive influence, obviously, in public economics, and I'll be able, to get, positions in terms of, being employed in the government, and then also helping the community.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, then, and all the best for your studies as well. And yes, do continue to attend the sessions of GTAC and also participate in the Knowledge Hub and read the papers that are published and the spending reviews. And thank you so much, and all the best. And there you have it. We have quite a number of students who are actually highlighting the importance of the papers being presented at the conference. But most importantly, I think what is coming out straight through is the fact that already at university, they're already picturing themselves within the professional space, and they're using the various platforms that are out there to help themselves. And here with me, I've got Miss Asanda Koyo. Tell us about yourself, where you're from, and how did you find out about this conference?
Good morning. I'm Asanda. I'm from the Nelson Mandela University. I'm doing my master's in economics. I found out about GTAC a couple of years ago from varsity. There was a there was a public economics winter school that I attended, and we presented on it. I think that was in 2021. And then I thought I should apply again to be part of this one as well, the Public Economics Conference. And it's been great experience. It's been very insightful and informative. Learning about the programs that government has for employing youth has been quite insightful.
Awesome. And what are your plans for the future?
I would like to become a financial economist and maybe find a space within National Treasury. Thank you.
Good luck and all the best. Okay, let's have perhaps maybe 2 more rounds. I have with me Patrick. Patrick, hi, how are you?
I'm pretty well, my brother. How are you?
Good, thank you. Please tell us about yourself. How did you find yourself here in the GTAC conference?
Hence, I said my name is Patrick. I'm from the University of Northwest Potchefstroom campus. I'm in the School of Governance. I'm doing political studies. I've heard about the GTAC at LinkedIn. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I used to follow them, so I just saw the conference. Yeah,
Great stuff. And what are your key highlights so far during this conference?
it has like gave me a variety of aspects. Yeah, in the political landscape mostly because there are kinds of like different aspects of people that they present through the conference. But the experience overall, it's quite very good for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's have perhaps one more who can come. And again, here we have a variety of students in economics and also in political science. Ma'am, how are you? Tell us about yourself and how did you find out about this conference?
Hi, my name is Lydia. I'm a master's student at Rhodes University. I found out about GTAC through a friend who works here, Mulogadi. She told me about the program and it was also trending on LinkedIn, I think. Yeah, so that's how I found out about the conference.
Okay, awesome. And what have been your key highlights so far?
I think not a highlight, but I'd say what I've learned, because I thought GTAC and the National Treasury is just one thing. So I've learned that it's a different thing. And my highlight also would be just learning how the public sector works, because I'm more of a private sector monetary policy. So it's good to know more of the physical policy, how the public sector works and all that.
Awesome. Thank you so much and all the best. And there you have it as we take the one last man standing. Tell us about yourself, where you're from, and how did you find out about this conference?
Okay, thank you. My name is Maurice Punduru. I'm from Jet Education Services. I'm a data analyst, researcher. I heard about GTAC from LinkedIn. Actually, I was fortunate that I worked on the Jobs Fund program in enterprise development and support for work seekers. So I was so interested in what the program was doing, and also the findings that came out of the program, like supporting the enterprises and also the people like who were looking for job, which are mostly like youth. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And what are your main plans for the future?
My main plan for the future, next year actually, I've applied for masters in data science. So as some of the presentation that were presented, it was indicated that one of the challenges is that youth they are struggling like from school to employment. So with the skills like that we are coming out now with the technology like courses like data science, these are the skills of the future. And I think this is what we need to start looking at and be enrolling in those kind of courses. And I think even like the universities, the government, and this, they need to look at that.
Thank you so much, Maurice. There you have it, skills of the future, and all the best to all the presenters, to the speakers. And it's quite amazing to see the interest and how they're connecting with the GTAC brand. But most importantly, I think the conscious to study economics, data science, and political studies. And most importantly, to connect with professionals who are part of the GTAC network, who are here. It's quite amazing, and all the best. And now at this time, I'll hand over to you, Vusi, back to the studio. Thank you.
All right, everybody, please come back to your chairs as you hear the song is coming up and calling you back. Thank you so much, Bailey, on those sidelines of the radio interview conversations. Fritz, if you can just hit the volume up a bit, people would hear that we are back and we are about to begin. Everybody, please make your way back to your seats. I see some of our colleagues are back online. I'm looking at the screen and a few people are there. So we should be ready to go right shortly.
So that's fine by me. So wake me up when it's all over. When I'm wiser and I'm older.
Please make your way back. We are about to begin. All right, without waste of time, thank you, Fritz. Thank you, Fritz. Welcome back, everyone, especially those that are joining us online. We are still coming live to you from our Mid-Trend Studios visual production. We are a Public Economics Conference 2023. This has been a fantastic conference we've had over the past day. Today is not different, as you heard at the beginning, with our speakers that gave you all the information, starting from Andrew and Bali coming in to facilitate a number of sessions that I'm pretty much sure you did enjoy. And now our audience here in the venue are sitting nice and cozy, ready to go ahead with us. And I hope you too are also cozy. They're having something to bite on as we continue our conversation today. Thank you again to my co-host, Veli, who was holding the sidelines of the interviews. If you missed some of those interviews, please be so kind and check our YouTube channel. Then you can hear what students are all about, how they found out about the conference, and especially what is standing out for them in this conference. So this is one signature conference of GTAC, as we always do. And please get our word out there by using a hashtag GTAC PEC 2023. We will try and find some of those interactions and read them as we proceed and go along. All right, our next speaker is probably in the venue and we will jump straight to them. I promised the audience and you at home that before we went to the break, that if you want to understand anything about government initiative to create jobs, Jobs Fund is something that you definitely need to know. So we are going to have our facilitator. I'll try and introduce them. I'm not sure if Najwa is here. Is Najwa online? All right. Let me see if Najwa, if you could come closer to the screen, and we will try and get a nice introduction for you as we continue today. I see Najwa is nice online. Maybe just to check if your mic is working, Najwa, how are you today? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good, Vusi. Ready to go with my panel. So there you can hear me in the room now.
Unmuted, or some technical issues that we're not getting a transmission from your side. But let's try again. Najwa, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Now you're sounding nice and crisp. Welcome to the 2023 installment of the Public Economic Conference. I hope you're good today.
Awesome.
Awesome, that's the word she's using there to welcome us. But I'm sure your content as well and presentation will be awesome and beyond. Nashwa Alice Edris, I think I got that correct. Nashwa, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. He is the Deputy Director General for Employment Facilitation, head of the Jobs Fund at the National Treasury. Nashwa has worked extensively in the public sector in key executive management roles, focusing on organizational transformation and promoting inclusive growth. She currently heads up the Jobs Fund, a multi-year, listen to this, a multi-year 9 billion fund. That's what she's heading, established by the government to encourage innovation and support initiatives with the potential to guarantee sustainable employment, not just employment, but sustainable employment, which is what we're looking for. The Jobs Fund co-finances interventions that will significantly contribute to job creation and partners with public, private, and non-governmental organizations to achieve these objectives. To tell us more about these, the initiative of the Jobs Fund will be Nashwa, who will be joined by a few of 2 or 3 of the colleagues that will also present on these issues. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you are online or you are here, please let's us all put our hands together and beautifully welcome Nashwa on stage.
Thank you, Vusi. Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon and a warm welcome to the session. I hope that all of you have enjoyed your lunch. We're really sorry that we cannot be there. And just to, in terms of some household things, when you see these little halos around our heads,
That's good.
it's not because the angels
How are you
have
feeling now?
descended, right?
Let it
The
play.
angels have not descended, but we are here to talk about whether there are perhaps a little bit of a silver lining in all this doom and gloom around fiscal constraints, trade-offs, and just, things not going as right as we hope that they would go in our country. I'm joined this afternoon by Vuyo Tatiana, and he's currently the head of monitoring and evaluation at the Jobs Fund. I'm also joined by Nazim Hendricks, who's a team leader and a technical Saxon. And, if you go to the schedule of events, you will see all the very important work that all of these people who are going to be presenting here this afternoon, all the things that they do. But just to say that here there is a founding CEO of RMB Fund Managers. She has over 30 years of capital market experience and has managed billions of rands. But at the heart of it, Heather is a woman that has led from the front, she has led from behind, and she has made sure that things happen on her watch. So that is just a taste of things to come. We're going to talk about challenge funds. Challenge funds are a versatile funding instrument. In our currently fiscally constrained context, it is thus useful to explore mechanisms that provide better bang for buck. Challenge funds complement public employment programs. Their focus, though, is medium to long term. And its success is achieved through meaningful partnerships where risk is appropriately allocated and benefits flow to those intended. And so without saying anything further, I hand over to Nazim. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Najwa, for the introduction. As Najwa said, in our brief presentation today, we're going to introduce the Jobs Fund to you and share with you what we've been able to achieve in driving impact, and also later on share our thoughts on the value of the Challenge Fund instrument within the wider funding landscape in achieving that impact and in addressing the multitude of challenges facing our country today, particularly within the context of a constrained public purse. Vuyo, next slide, please. So by way of overview, the Jobs Fund is a program of the National Treasury. We were capitalized in 2011 with, as Vusi said, a 9 billion rand initial allocation to be deployed along Challenge Fund principles on a co-funding basis. Its mandate is twofold: to test innovative job creation models, to share those lessons and good practices, thus promoting wider market adoption, and scale those replicable models, as well as promoting the Challenge Fund instrument also for wider adoption in the market. One may say, therefore, that the Jobs Fund represents government's research and development capability with respect to job creation interventions. Now, the Jobs Fund was established within the context of higher unemployment in the country. One may say not much has changed there. However, the fund was never meant and is not a mass creation, job creation program, nor was the fund meant to compete or replace programs already in place within the various spheres of government and various departments within government. Rather, the fund complements other government programs by uncovering, piloting innovative job creation models to identify through experimentation solutions that can eventually be replicated and scaled. And by encouraging and creating the space for that innovation to occur, supports long-term sustainable job creation in our country. Now, through the Jobs Fund, Challenge Fund instrument, we were able to draw on the most competitive ideas and the latest innovations from across multiple economic sectors, from various partners within the private sector as well as the public sector. We were able to partner with capable and experienced intermediaries, bringing their expertise and networks to bear on solving some of these most stubborn challenges that we face. Also, we were able to leverage public funds to use public funds, to crowd in and leverage significant private sector and other resources in order to maximize the public investment in social impact. Critical, based on what Najwa was saying, we are aware that we are operating within a context of a constrained public purse, and effectiveness of that public spend is crucial to any program within government at the moment. Through all of this, we were able to build sustainable institutional capacity within the market to drive employment from both the demand as well as the supply side. The Jobs Fund from inception has recognized the importance of any government program to be able to monitor and systemically estimate its impact. This is especially so within the context of this constrained fiscal resource that we have. The Jobs Fund therefore has a rigorous monitoring, reporting, evaluation and learning framework which supports the Jobs Fund's learnings and dissemination of such learnings to the market. The fund has been fully allocated. The initial allocation of 9 billion rand has been allocated, fully allocated at this stage. Now, next slide, please, Vuyo. So where does the Jobs Fund fit into the current landscape? Now, we've already said we are not here to compete with any other program within government. And as can be seen from the slide, as can be seen from the slide, the Jobs Fund plays a complementary role within the social protection and employment landscape in our country. However, there are several government programs aimed at addressing the earning and employment-related challenges in our country. The social protection system, for example, provides grant social welfare services for vulnerable groups. Temporary work opportunities are provided by the expanded public works program and also the community works program and other mass employment programs, for example, through the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention. DFIs or developed finance institutions and other smaller business programs direct financial support to SMEs and agricultural cooperatives. And then we have a multitude of business incentives mainly through the Department of Trade and Industry, aimed at promoting business development of various ecosystems throughout the country. And the government currently spends in excess of 50 billion rand a year on these incentives. As I've said before, the role of the Jobs Fund is to create space for innovation by partnering with intermediaries to address barriers with both the demand and the supply side of the employment creation. It is complementary to all of these programs that is currently in place by government. Next slide, please, Vuya. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. It's really about the Jobs Fund theory of change. Suffice to say, we have covered most of the issues on here so far and will in subsequent slide. But suffice to say that the Jobs Fund theory of change highlights two key pillars of the Jobs Fund mandate. That is job creation and secondly, uncovering scalable and replicable job creation models and provide sustainable solution to facilitate that sustainable job creation models. Next slide, please, Vuya. So what is a challenge fund instrument? A challenge fund instrument is an instrument versatile, as Najwa said earlier. It is a means of allocating scarce financial resources, usually through grants, to support innovative solutions to challenges that one may face, and to engage new actors, widening the scope of participation within that landscape in addressing these challenges. The defining features of that challenge fund is that funding is allocated on a competitive basis. In doing so, one tries to identify and support the best solution to a predetermined challenge. The aim is to identify innovations and new ways of solving challenges, as a challenge fund is used where solutions often do not exist at any given time. Its intent is to create partnerships with new actors, both as implementers as well as financiers to those various programs. In practical terms, what does this mean? It means that the challenge fund is implemented through a transparent selection of grantees against predetermined criteria, which always includes an assessment of issues such as additionality, which speaks to what would happen to a particular program without the support of the fund or government in effect. The level of innovation evident within that model, is it simply a rehash of what is currently being done in the market? Or is it something that tries to approach a particular problem in a different way? It also looks at the ability to scale and replicate the model, thereby creating opportunities for larger implementation models or the scaling of that model, thereby scaling impact wider, but at a reduced cost, in a more efficient, more effective way. It also contributes to systemic change in the market. Now, many programs, many projects would claim to have that systemic change. But until we address, and this is what a challenge fund clearly looks at, addressing the root causes of those social challenges and finding solutions to those root causes. By risk sharing with the grantee, usually through co-investment, that is the provision, we call it match funding. This allows a challenge fund to leverage other financial resources beyond their own grant contributions. I'll get back and refer to that issue a little bit later. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is simply a graphical representation of what the challenge fund instrument or mechanism tries to do. Key to note is that challenge fund targets short-term outcomes. It does, but its ultimate aim is to test solution that will create long-term benefits and solution by fostering collaboration and building sustainable institutional capacity within the employment ecosystem. So the Jobs Fund is a challenge fund. Next slide, please, Vuya. The Jobs Fund is a challenge fund instrument. How have we performed today? In the slide, we summarize the Jobs Fund performance against its headline indicators, which is jobs and ultimately disbursement of the grants allocated to the Jobs Fund. As at 30 June 2023, the Jobs Fund achieved 130% of the original jobs creation target, which was 150,000. The jobs created to date, we've created or placed 195 unemployed young people into jobs against a target of 150,000, as I've said. These jobs were realized against a grant disbursement of 6.6 billion thus far. The grant disbursement has attracted 13 billion rand in cash contributions from Jobs Fund partners to date. This is very important, right? Because I think few grant funding programs can claim to have this level of leverage from large private sector partnership. The ratio, therefore, so for every rand of public funding that was invested into the programs or projects that we implement, private sector, social enterprises, non-government institutions have contributed 2 rand to the implementation of that program. And the initial target of the Jobs Fund was always a target of a minimum of 1:1 co-funding within the projects. The Jobs Fund has to date contracted 163 partners. 85% of those partners are from the private sector and not-for-profit entities. The Jobs Fund, although not a training institution as such, has trained over 306,000 participants in a variety of market-related skills. When I say we are not a training organization, or we do not necessarily fund training, we fund training on the basis of it being a demand-led function, right? So we do not simply train for the sake of training. We train people in a focused way so that they are able to be transitions into jobs that is being created through our projects or available in the market. Over and above the 195,000 permanent jobs and placements that we've been able to achieve thus far, we've also achieved 83,000 seasonal and short-term jobs that have been created over the life of the fund thus far. And we have placed, and 23,000 young people have completed internships over that period as well. Now, very importantly, okay, because as I've said before, we look at the demand and the supply side of the economy in implementing our projects or the program. Over 72,000 small, medium, and micro enterprises and smallholder or emerging farmers have been supported through the jobs-funded initiatives thus far. Also, speaking to sustainability, 51,000 our projects post-implementation, that is after they've completed their implementation of the Jobs Fund projects, 51,000 jobs have been created post-implementation of those projects. This speaks to the level, the catalytic effects of the Jobs Fund support, as well as the sustainability of the interventions that we do implement. All of that is very good, right? And of course, that is a major problem. But what the slide does not show is what we have been able to achieve in terms of impact in the wider ecosystem. As previously stated, the Jobs Fund is about more than creating jobs, although that is our core focus as well. It is about collaborating, building capacity in that ecosystem, and utilizing scarce public resources to achieve sustainable impact over the long term. My colleague Vuyo, in his presentation, will be taking you through some examples of what that impact is and how we've been able to achieve it. Next slide, please, Vuyo. So the Jobs Fund operates in South Africa as a challenge fund. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You can look at this slide in your own time. It shows some international examples of challenge funds which have been very successful in driving impact, not only in jobs, but other social challenges as well. Please have a look at those examples in your own time to speak to the value and the versatility of a challenge fund instrument in addressing the various social challenges that we face in this country. Chair, next slide, please. In summary, Chair, I'd like to speak to why we think, right, as evidenced by the Jobs Fund's work to date, the Challenge Fund instrument is a valuable tool in achieving impact within the context which we find ourselves. It allows social issues to be addressed effectively and efficiently by identifying, testing, and refining innovative solutions to a myriad of social issues, including unemployment. It creates space for innovation by crowding in the capacity of the private sector to propose and implement innovative solutions and viable solutions to a given problem. Applying a transparent and competitive process to select the most competitive proposals for funding while avoiding market distortions. That transparency and competitiveness, Chair, if I may, is very important because all partnerships, particularly with the private sector and non-government institutions, is built on trust, is built on building that relationship, all of which takes time to do. I will, Vuyo, as well as myself, will give an example of how we've been able to achieve that later on as well. And then building sustainable, meaningful partnership with the private sector to facilitate risk sharing, as Najwa mentioned earlier. Thus, leveraging match funding scales the impact that a given budget allocation can achieve, thus improving the allocative efficiency of public funding allocations. It enables the demand and supply constraints within our economy to be addressed by supporting both demand-side measures, that is, working with private sector to increase enterprise growth and hence the demand for labor, as well as the supply side through support for work seekers, either through in-job training, matching, and capacity building within the ecosystem. Lastly, it enables the scaling of successful models to be grounded on learnings, bringing effectiveness and efficiency to the manner in which public funds is deployed in trying to achieve such impact. Next slide, please. Thank you. That is briefly our presentation on challenge funds. I now want to introduce Heather Jackson. Najwa did introduce her to give a private sector perspective of catalyzing the system change that we're looking to do, building those partnerships through the challenge fund instruments, etc. Heather?
Great. Thank you so much, Nazim. I presume I can be heard clearly.
You can, Heather. Please go ahead.
So very warm greetings to everyone, virtual greetings. And it's my pleasure and honor to give you some perspective as a partner, as a private sector partner to the Jobs Fund over many years, and now in our third iteration in terms of partnering with an innovative financing solution around a job creation strategy. We found it enormously rewarding working with the Jobs Fund, and I think in particular, really working on the kinds of solutions that we believe are relevant to South Africa and can be scaled. And that's a really key aspect is, our problems are vast, our potential solutions are really exciting. And if we can demonstrate that we can achieve the kinds of strategies and successfully crowd funding into job creation, then we can scale. And that's really what we're all about. Slide, please. While Nazim finds a slide. So just by way of background, I'm the CEO of RBN Fund Managers. We are a dedicated impact investor, meaning that we combine and marry a focus on financial returns with impact returns, and the two are equal. As I said, we've recently partnered with the Jobs Fund for a third time. The previous two solutions that we created raised a total of 2 billion rands, over 2 billion from the private sector, from pension fund investors, and we created over 16,000 permanent jobs. And I noticed, and it's wonderful to see the enthusiasm, the talent coming in the young audience. And I know it's a few economists, so I'm actually originally an economist, so forgive me. This is my framework. I still see the world in terms of supply and demand. It's a very useful framing for the South African context in terms of both the challenge and the opportunity. So if we broadly look at our ecosystem divided between the supply of fund on the one hand and the unmet demand on the other hand, and we put in the middle this intermediary, that's where we find the solutions. So what I mean by that is we need to match the supply to the demand. Now the demand, as we put it here, is within the Jobs Fund context, is our completely unacceptable high levels of unemployment. Linked to that, we believe is a
I think
often
I think if you
exaggerated
don't
in the
mind, put
eyes
your
of
camera off.
investors. So if we switch over to the supply side, sorry, have I put my camera off? You want me to put my camera off?
I was suggesting that it might improve. You're breaking up slightly, if you don't mind.
Okay. Oh, okay, sure, no problem. That's actually easier for me as well. Okay, so on the supply side, South Africa is in a very interesting emerging market. We are richly endowed with savings. So, you know, we've got the Najwa alluded and Nazim to the public purse being really stretched at the moment. But if you look at our private savings, pension funds, the likes, we have about 7 trillion worth of savings, and that it puts us as a percentage of GDP on a par with OECD levels. So there is money available. It's how do we create the solutions that are attractive to those pools of funding such that, you know, we are able to scale solutions. And that's really what our partnership with the Jobs Fund has been all about. Currently, we're partnering as RBN with SASFIN to increase access to credit for SMEs via SASFIN Bank primarily. But what I really want to emphasize, and this will come through in some of the other data and the slides that I present to you, is it's not good enough to just rely on the private sector or the public sector. The two need to come together. And that's what's so powerful about the Jobs Fund program in our experience, is we partner with an element of an exceptionally capable state that is able to provide the correct incentives and oversight in terms of delivery. And we work towards those targets together with a combined ambition to achieve the goal and implement an innovative solution. And that's absolutely key. And I think we are still blessed in South Africa to have a very strong, sophisticated investment sector, but allied to that, the strong regulatory capacity. Next slide, please, Nazim. Is the sound quality better now?
Thanks.
Good. Okay, so, and I know we've got Vuyo, and Vuyo is a tough taskmaster when it comes to data and proving what you say. So I'm relying heavily on data in my presentation. So in 2020, we thought it would be interesting because no study had been conducted of this nature to actually survey pension funds in South Africa and say, what are your attitudes towards impact investing? Where do you want to see investments? Is it important to you? Do you see growth? And we commissioned through the job and through our advocacy work in our previous program, we commissioned Intellidex to conduct this survey. They surveyed about 2/3 of all pension fund trustees and principal officers, about 2.6 trillion represented in this survey. And the results were very affirming. So first of all, sustainability was overwhelming. You can see those blue charts, overwhelmingly supported. So very much targeting sustainability in their pension funds. They also saw the importance of sustainability increasing over the next 5 years, and actually comparatively to overseas even more so. So it really is a focus for South African investors. And then when we ask them, well, what are the most important environmental, social, and governance focus areas for you? it turned out that on the social, it was absolutely in the mandate of Jobs Fund. So no surprise, employment creation, eradicating unemployment, and also reducing our dreadful inequality levels. So those are the priorities that investors want. So they want financial solutions that address the social ills that we continue to experience. And then on the environmental side, again, probably, and this, remember, the study came out in 2020, it was water use and renewable energy. I would imagine it's very much still the same. So, for the audience as well, when you're looking to create solutions, those of you that want to get into finance, these are great areas to focus on. Next slide, please. So one of the features of the Jobs Fund is for all their partners, they insist on independent evaluations of how your project is performing. And we do one in the middle of the project implementation and then one at the end. Our first project, I'm going to show you a little bit of data in the next slide, was you putting in place a guarantee mechanism, which we believed would mitigate those risk perceptions I spoke about and encourage institutional pension fund investors to invest into our strategy of lending to small, medium enterprises, SMEs. It's a strategy that they hadn't taken up previously. And so we needed to test this thesis that if we had a guarantee in place, they would be more comfortable putting their pension fund monies into our strategy, into our investment. In total, we raised about just over R1 billion into this strategy with the guarantee. And at the end of not the end of the fund, because remember the fund goes on into perpetuity and continues to create jobs, but after about 3 years of being implemented, we surveyed these investors. And the findings were very encouraging. So first of all, 80% of those investors believed that their funds had been used for job creating opportunities. I'm not sure what the why, where the other 20% was, but they also, 60% believed that social impact investments were very risky before investing into our fund, which was called ACEF, the Atlantic Credit Enhanced Fund. Now, what was, for me, one of the most powerful findings, if you look at the bottom of this slide and you look at those little bars, we posed the question to investors. So at the bottom, we said, before investing into this fund, I believe that social impact investments were highly risky. And you can see from the bars at the bottom, most agreed. So either strongly agreed, or were neutral, or slightly disagreed. None of them strongly disagreed. Okay, so they thought impact investing was more risky. When they were surveyed in the present tense, in this instance, which was in 2018, they said, currently, I believe that social impact investments are highly risky, and that there'd been a complete shift down that risk spectrum. So 40% now said that strongly disagreed that impact investing was inherently highly risky. So, it was extremely gratifying, I think, to all of us involved, that in a relatively short space of time, you could actually shift investment perceptions, deliver the financial returns and deliver the impact. And then without dwelling on this, because I do cover it quite a lot in the next slide, I will just point to, see on the achievements of the fund, it is heavily measured, heavily audited, heavily accountable. And I think that's a really key aspect of partnering with the Jobs Fund, is that there are lots of eyes making sure. I mean, Nazim never forgets to remind us that this is public funding, this is taxpayer money and very scarce taxpayer money that is being allocated into these strategies. And so we need to prove that it works, that it's actually bang for buck, that it is worthwhile. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a bit heavy. I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but I thought, and I actually haven't presented this very much. This is from, I had the privilege of doing my master's in sustainability. I graduated in 2021, and I was very fortunate to get access to the data from a number of credit guarantee schemes. Remember, we put in place a guarantee. So in essence, we were managing a credit guarantee fund with the Jobs Fund. or with support from the Jobs Fund. And so I was very interested to test how other credit guarantee schemes had behaved, had performed in the South African context. And the Jobs Fund were very generous in making available data from 2013 to 2019 that I had access to. Our fund was the Atlantic Credit Fund. You can see that first column. So obviously I was able to extract performance data from that. And then there were two other credit guarantee schemes in the South African ecosystem. The Kula Fund, I looked at it from 1996 to 2019, and then something called Tembani, the Tembani International Guarantee Fund, which has been around since 1996. I then utilized, without getting too technical, the OECD's DAC criteria, which really measure the success of these kinds of strategy around very intuitive criteria, those being the relevance. Are you making a mark? What are you trying with the why? Why are you doing this? And then we look at a measure of efficiency. Is it actually working, and how do you prove that? Then we look at effectiveness. Are you actually achieving the results that you set out to do? And then slightly more tricky ones to define the impact, the more qualitative aspects of your results, and how do you believe, is that impact credible? And then lastly, the sustainability. Is this a strategy, to Nazim's earlier point, that can be scaled, that we can replicate, and it's worth, again, it's worth the experiment of taxpayer funding. And so if I look across these funds, it was really remarkable to me that we already knew that we were performing well with our fund, Atlantic Fund, from 2014 when we implemented it to 2019. We had said that we would raise about 300 million from private sector, and we ended up raising, well, in total over $1 billion. So we exceeded. If we looked at the Jobs Fund, their target had been raising 2.3, and the actual up until 2019 was 3.1. So also ahead of target. I mean, Nazim showed you the updated stats that they've actually raised 13.3 billion up until now. So continue to grow very strongly. The efficiency in terms of the grant, the cost per job also for both Atlantic and for the Jobs Fund, very much better than target. So that was a big tick. Total job creation, slightly ahead, so pretty much on par with the targets, which is an excellent result. And then the crucial thing. So if I go across to your Kula, not to knock them, but this is data driven. Kula had raised, they didn't have a target, but against no target, they had raised since 1996, so over a long period to 2019, 3.2 billion in terms of private capital against benchmark. They had also, in terms of their grant, raised pretty significant sums of grant. The Tembani Credit Fund had also raised significant amounts from their perspective. So they'd all raised, all of these programs have been successful at raising funding. But around job creation, in terms of the effectiveness, for both Kula and for Tembani, there was no target. So it was very hard to evaluate its success against intentions, against actual targets. The cost per job was also, particularly in Tembani's case, at 162 Rand, simply not credible. And we went backwards and forwards trying to sort of get to the bottom of that. And then the nub of it for me is the Jobs Fund. All these jobs are evidenced, verified, and then independently audited. For Kula and for Tembani, everything was self-reported, soft verification, and no independent audit. And so in terms of the sustainability and the credibility, I think the Jobs Fund really shines a light on and raises a flag very high in terms of setting standards for how we can succeed. And I think when you partner with the Jobs Fund and you achieve the results, it makes all who are involved extremely proud and extremely keen to scale and to see what more we can do. I think I'll leave it there, and I'm looking forward to the discussion later on and to your questions.
Thank you, Huda. Nazim, are there any specific issues that you would like to raise with Heather right now? There have been questions in the chat, and I've attempted to answer some of those questions already. And I'm sure Vusi and Billy will help me if there are questions in the audience. But perhaps you have some questions to Heather. Thank you.
Thank you, Najwa. I actually do, and it's about this partnership. My first question is about this partnership, right? That is required between government and the private or the NGO sector. In your mind, Heather, why is it that we've not necessarily been that successful? The Jobs Fund has been, but on a bigger scale. Why is it that we've not been that successful in cultivating those partnerships? And what, in your mind, is the key elements of that successful partnership?
So thanks, Nazim. And obviously this is just, myself and my team and our experiences, views drawn from that. So it's limited. But I think what I find very interesting, and I've observed, through COVID, we've had emergency responses around the Reserve Bank's guarantee scheme into the banks. We've seen the bounce back scheme from National Treasury, again, trying to incentivize the banks as really the biggest potential vehicle to provide credit access to SMEs. And we've seen very little take up. I can only surmise, and again, a little bit is drawn out of my research, because I did interview some of the banks as well in terms of trying to understand why the take up from the Kula guarantee scheme, which was very much directed toward at incentivizing the banks, just fell off a cliff in around 2008, and is for all intents and just not functioning. And it's really, trying to understand why is that? You've got cheap guarantees available. And I think it comes down to, and again, drawing on our experience from the Jobs Fund, working with the Jobs Fund, is we've had a very clear purpose articulated, very clear accountability outlined, very clear deliverables, targets that need to be met, and then also the resourcing. Because if you are going to ensure that the quality of the data is credible, and that you are going to actually gather the right data, you're going to report it, you're going to evidence it, and you're going to verify it. That does require resourcing. And I think part of our partnership has been to emphasize the importance of producing that data, but then also supporting its, obtaining it and verifying it. And I don't think that the same level of commitment has existed in the other programs. And I also don't think that, I think it's more, it's sort of more broad, widespread in terms of a program that's announced for the banks. It's not designed in a bespoke sense. And so certainly what I unearthed in interviewing banks around Kula was their key performance objectives, KPIs, indicators, were not aligned to achieving those kinds of targets. And I think unless you are aligned and you actually contract for that, it's very hard to deliver.
Thanks, Heather.
If you see it's been successful, then and that's the other route.
Now, just one more question for you, Heather. So I think what the point you make early in your presentation is that there is this pool of savings in this country that's not necessarily being deployed to achieving social impact as such, right? And it is our view at the Jobs Fund that to be able to do that, one needs to almost cultivate a changing behavior of these allocators of capital, right? Particularly the banks, maybe, right? Now, in saying changing behaviors, changing the way they assess applications, changing the way they approach developmental type of projects and to achieve this impact. How, in your mind, do we go ahead and change that behavior over time?
I'm going to try my camera again. So Nazim, just tell me if it sorry.
No, you're fine.
Just tell me if it plays up.
You're fine.
So I believe strongly, and Nazim, we were both attended the Africa Impact Summit a few weeks ago, and it's actually a question I would like to put back to you, if I may, is I believe that, having partnered with the Jobs Fund over many years now, over 3 projects, that in this challenge fund concept has worked. I mean, you've shown the cumulative data. It's indisputable that this is a model that works for this, for solving this particular challenge around job creation. Now, I think the private sector and the NGO world are very competitive. If you throw down the gauntlet and you incentivize on a competitive basis and say, bring us solutions, you are always oversubscribed in terms of your applications. There is a demand for this. So my question would be, why is it not being scaled? Why is it not, why is public funding not pouring into solutions like this rather than designing something new, untested, because this demonstrably works?
Yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, if I may answer, and of course, being at the Jobs Fund, having been here for 8 years, seen the impact that we've had, of course, I would say the Jobs Fund has to be capitalized into the future, right? Of course, one has to acknowledge that there is a constrained public purse. The point, though, is that we need to create the space for innovation to build that partnership, right? So that we build better systems going forward. If we continue to implement the same instruments, and there is value, of course, in many of those instruments, we will find ourselves, continuously hitting our head against that brick wall of achieving that impact. And a lot of the systems that are currently in place are successful to a point, but it's because of a lack of innovation that is built into that system. Any private sector investor will tell you, if you're going to sell a product into the market, if you sell the same product for the next 10 years, eventually you're going to suffer, right? Because you need to build that product. You need to build the system so that the innovation comes through to attract other people into that particular partnership. Okay. Thanks, Heather. I think, if I may, Anthony asked a very interesting question in the chat about what are the impact criteria we use and so forth, and Najwa did answer. I'd just like to highlight 1 or 2 projects that we've done. The first one was a project with an organization called Unjani. The aim of that project was to capacitate unemployed nurses to open or establish and sustainably operate primary care healthcare facilities within our poorer communities. The project started in about 2017, completed in 2021, having successfully established 44 sustainable clinics within these communities and treating over 10,000 patients within those clinics. Now, of course, we measure the jobs that is created, we measure the spending within that project, etc. But we also measure the impact on the various communities in which those clinics were established. We also try and measure the impact on the lives of those community members by looking at what cost they are being treated at, how many is actually going through those clinics, so we can alleviate the pressure on public healthcare facilities. And that is typically how a Jobs Fund project would be implemented from that point of view. The other one I wanted to highlight was the Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator. So it's an excellent example and one that we are very proud of in what can be achieved with a Challenge Fund instrument, right? To build capacity within the system, within an ecosystem through that partnership and achieve impact. Was it easy? Definitely not, right? In 2012, for argument's sake, we contracted Harambee to transition 10,000 young people into placements, into jobs that already existed in the economy. But because of a lack of skill, they could not access those jobs. That was over 10 years ago. 10,000, 2,500 young people per year, right? Targets were achieved. 2015, we scaled that program slightly. to about 18,000 young people. Also, again, targets met, etc. Interestingly, in 2022, Harambee was appointed as the National Pathway Manager for the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, right? And they were able, in the first year of operation, to June 2023, they were able to support over 990,000 young people, right? Place 157,903 young people into opportunities at a cost just over R1,000 per person, per young person, which then tells you the benefit of building the scale, taking an organization, building capacity patiently, right? With taking the learnings that you learn every year in terms of implementing, and then building that capacity to enable you to have an impact that they've been able to have today. Of course, the Jobs Fund was the appointed fund manager for the National Pathway Manager Network scope of work as well. But again, a system has been developed called sayouth.mobi, right? Enabling young people to be transitioned, right? And effective linkages to be built between those unemployed young people and opportunities that exist within the market. Successful partnership, there was innovation. Partnership was built over time. We were able to leverage substantial private sector funding into that. SA Youth Mobi currently has over 4.6 million young people registered onto the network, and overall we've been able to transition over 1.1 million young people from unemployment into employment opportunities. So the collaboration, the benefit of long-term collaboration with private sector and NGO sector is clear to be seen in all of those, in those two interventions. Thank you. Najwa? Najwa, are you on mute?
Thank you, Nazim. And just to say that, I mean, earlier on, we heard from Kate about the program around this, the Social Employment Fund, the Social Employment Stimulus, and we heard about the successes of the Teachers Assistant Program, and what Nazim has just spoken about now, the sayouth.mobi site that was birthed through Harambee with Jobs Fund support is now also the platform that gave life and was able to scale at the rate that it was required to scale to support the teacher support program. But let me hand over to Vuyo to share with you some of the results of our evaluations. Vuyo?
Thank you very much, Najwa, and a warm good afternoon to everybody online as well at the studios. Nazim, if you could just assist me with the presentation quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, what we want to do this afternoon is really, now that we've spoken to you about what a challenge fund is, and given some high-level sort of like cumulative results over the last 10 years that we've been able to achieve, at least in terms of headline indicators, we want to talk a little bit now more about some examples of projects that we've been able to support. Those projects obviously representing a particular intent on the part of the Jobs Fund with respect to our impact in those spaces. Next slide, please. Right. So learning is a key pillar in the implementation of the Jobs Fund. It was therefore important for us to embed at its design a capability on the collection of credible data on performance of Jobs Fund job creation models that we support. So our monitoring and evaluation framework includes the independent evaluation and audit of supported projects, as Heather has also alluded to earlier. Next slide, please. South Africa is in a labor surplus economy. We've been hearing this, of course, since yesterday in a conference. And in order for us to improve the rate of economic participation, we need to find ways to stimulate demand for labor, but more particularly to stimulate the demand for unskilled and low-skilled labor. a significant component of the solution towards stimulating labor demand is in growing our SMME sector, of course. But Professor Friedman yesterday said that we can't hope to succeed in this pursuit if we go about finding solutions using models that perpetuate outdated institutional behavioral and cognitive patterns. That is why it is important to have an experimentation capability to test new ways of stimulating economic growth in the country. SMMEs are necessary for growth in South Africa, but more importantly, they can better support inclusive growth. Again, yesterday, Professor Friedman indicated that whatever economic model that we may come to adopt as a country, we know now already that the majority of our labor force will not be participating in the formal economy space. Therefore, deliberate and appropriately designed interventions that look to support small and micro enterprises are critical. SMMEs play a significant role in the reduction of poverty and the dependency on government grants, especially in underserved and rural areas. But of course, the SMME sector is weighed down by persisting perceptions of being too high risk to invest in. These patterns of thought and behavior by enabling institutions such as banks and financiers need to be progressively overcome in order for us to allow SMMEs to thrive. One way the Jobs Fund is doing this is by piloting pragmatic SME support models, which include blended finance options for business growth and alternative risk assessment strategies in niche sectors. And in so doing, prove through demonstration effect the efficacy of these innovative models. Next slide, please. And so our first example is the A2Pay project, which is an example of the Jobs Fund support of initiatives that aim to revitalize and stimulate township economies. A2Pay supports South African-owned businesses in the informal township economy across several provinces, in fact, all of the provinces at this stage. The partnership between A2Pay and the Jobs Fund focuses on providing spaza shop owners with a point-of-sale technology to bring vital prepaid services and products such as airtime, electricity vouchers, bus tickets, money remittances, etc., to peri-urban and rural communities. A2Pay provides informal retail operators with tailored business development support, which is designed to help operators grow their businesses. Next slide, please. So the comprehensive support offered by A2Pay has given spaza shop owners a better sense of control over their businesses and has resulted in diversified goods and services offered by these retailers, better stock and financial management in their businesses, growth in revenues. It has resulted in resilient businesses that have weathered shocks such as the COVID-19 pandemic and obviously the associated lockdowns and the civil unrest of 2021. It has resulted in the participation of more than 6,700 spaza shops and the creation of over 12,000 sustainable jobs. Other benefits to communities have included the reduction of transport costs, which would have been typically incurred when traveling to purchase these goods and services in urban centers. Next slide, please. So what have we learned from these types of interventions? The deployment of technology is a useful tool for the revitalization of township economies. Technology provision, along with tailored business development support, can help stimulate local economic development and promote the circulation of money within communities that need it the most, and in turn, also promote sustainable livelihoods. So demand-led informal sector initiatives armed with appropriate support tools can not only work, but actually produce viable and growing enterprises. Intervening in the informal economy in a catalytic way can, of course, be expensive initially, but the consequent social impact is significant. The case for the multiplier benefits of investing in the informal economy was well made, I believe, in the earlier segments today, where we were dealing with spending review case studies. So partnering with the right intermediary, such as an A2Pay, can have the effect of multiplying public investment through improving government's allocative efficiencies in the medium to long term. Public funding and support can also promote improved institutional capability, allowing intermediaries like A2Pay and the Harambee example that Nazim just spoke to. It can assist these organizations to wean themselves off of government subsidies, replacing government altogether in those value chains. Next slide, please. The DFDC HOTFIN projects are examples of the Jobs Fund piloting initiatives that aim to create systemic change in key value chains such as agriculture. These interlinked projects are the result of the Jobs Fund partnering with the Deciduous Fruit Producers Trust, or DFPT for short. So this partnership was firstly to help 21 Black smallholder farmers become commercialized, and then secondly, to help these farmers grow their enterprises to sustained integration into this lucrative value chain. So through the initial DFDC project, the 21 Black farmers were supported to improve productivity in order for them to commercialize their operations. And this was done through the provision of technical skills development, mentorship, assistance with production inputs, provision of machinery and equipment, improvement of quality standards, and the facilitation of access to markets. The HOTFIN project then recognized that it was not enough to bring these farmers to commercial status, as they also needed continued access to finance to grow and entrench their integration in the deciduous fruit value chain. To this end, a sustainable 600 million Rand industry-specific funding mechanism was launched. This fund will support emerging farmers moving up the value chain. The fund matches the amount of funding made available to a farmer to their income profile, thus tailoring the provision of debt, making it more appropriate for emerging farmers. Next slide, please. So the two projects in partnership with the Deciduous Fruits Producers Trust have resulted in a doubling of the initial grant by leveraging commercial capital. An improvement in agronomic practices has also been a result of these projects, and this has resulted in better yields and quality produce, and in turn, of course, has also improved the farmers' revenues. 200 hectares have been planted, and an additional 100 hectares is expected to be planted over the next 12 months, thus demonstrating the growth that was intended for the supported farmers. A reduced weighted average cost of capital for the 225 million Rands worth of loan transaction approved so far has also been another result. And this reduced weighted average cost of capital therefore means that there is an improvement in the affordability of these loans for the farmers. So the creation of a perpetual fund in partnership with an industry body that will serve the growth needs of the industry's emerging players in the future is yet another important outcome from these two projects. Next slide, please. So reflecting on what we have learned from these DFPT initiatives, we conclude that emerging farmer support initiatives need to be comprehensive, addressing at least the minimum aspects of technical support, access to appropriate financing solutions, and access to markets. The involvement of industry bodies such as DFPT gives interventions better prospects for effective systemic change, as successful models can be more easily replicated across the industry. So the creation of an evergreen fund ensures that the benefits and impacts of these interventions continue beyond government's involvement. This has a catalytic effect throughout the industry and promotes long-term sustainability. Some immediate systemic change evidence of shifting perceptions by traditional financiers can be gleaned in Nedbank and ABSA's now interest in looking to participate in transactions with these Black farmers in the industry. Next slide, please. So colleagues, in conclusion, to be fiscally responsible, it is important for government to have experimentation capability in order to first test the efficacy of new social impact ideas before investing significant scarce resources in these interventions. This will ensure improved fiscal efficiencies as well as better social impact outcomes for government in the long run. Challenge funds are effective in uncovering job creation models that work within the current South African context of fiscal constraints and a labor surplus. Challenge funds allow for appropriate risk sharing between government and its social partners in piloting and scaling innovative social impact models. Challenge funds also allow for partnering with capable and resourced intermediaries whose expertise and track record can help improve government's social outcomes over the medium to long term. Monitoring and evaluation are critical in the design of government programs in order to fully understand the overall efficacy and mechanics of these interventions. Of course, I would say that being the manager for monitoring and evaluation. But to give you some sense of this, right? It was through an expenditure review on the Jobs Fund conducted by GTAC's data analytics team last year that we know that the Jobs Fund's operating cost remains low relative to the value of its funded projects. It is through this review that we know that from inception to about 2020, the fund's operating costs have stayed below 5% of the total value of projects managed by the fund. We also know through this review that the fund's operating costs as a proportion of the grant amount disbursed from inception to date come in at a competitive 11% or so. We also know that the majority of jobs created by the Jobs Fund are full-time equivalent jobs. And again, it is through a 3-year longitudinal study conducted by the Jobs Fund and concluded last year that we know that the jobs created by the Jobs Fund initiatives are long-term in nature, lasting on average about 3 years at any one employer. We also know through this tracer study that a good proportion of Jobs Fund participants in the support for work seeker space are employed within the first 6 months of their participation in supported interventions. This, of course, bucks the trend discussed in yesterday's conversations around the poor transition of school leavers into employment, which can take years in some instances. The tracer study showed how a significant majority of business owners supported through the Jobs Fund were still running their own businesses, and that, in fact, about 20% of these business owners were running additional businesses. This, of course, throughout the COVID period and again, the civil unrest in 2021. And of course, the tracer study also highlighted how over 93% of business owners kept financial records and saw a growth in the average salaries they earned from their businesses over the study period. So the Jobs Fund has therefore been able to demonstrate through experimentation and assessment the ability of challenge funds to maximize scarce government resources through, amongst other things, crowding in of substantial private sector resources, over 13 billion in the Jobs Fund's instance, and the innovative use of the grant in a way that promotes better allocative efficiencies. The fund has been able to demonstrate the ability of challenge funds to promote institutional capability and growth, and we spoke about the Harambee example. It's been able to support the establishment of industry-wide evergreen funds. We also spoke about the ASEF fund. So these evergreen funds will be able to continue to benefit industry players and participants beyond government involvement. And so my last point then is to say, learning coming out of piloted and assessed projects can contribute to debates on economic policy formulation, especially in support of informed, pragmatic policy pertaining to the informal economy. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to say thank you very much for your attention. I'll hand back to Nadra.
Thank you so much for your thank you, and thank you to Heather, and thank you to Nazim. I think you've said it all. You've said it really well. But they've asked me to summarize, and that's going to be impossible. But perhaps just to leave you with the following. In summary, the Jobs Fund has driven systems change in South Africa by strategically investing in sectors with growth potential, by supporting innovation and skills development and infrastructure and green economy transitions, while also advocating for policy reforms and prioritizing inclusivity and long-term impact. These efforts can collectively contribute to addressing the challenges in public finance, fostering economic growth, and creating employment, but by that we also mean sustainable employment. So thank you very much. Brought to you on time at 4:30 sharp. Thank you. I mean 2:30, 1400.
Five minutes. Thank you.